Okay, so we're going to start. And little break from Talmud study. We're going to look at some passages, just a few passages actually, in the Megillat Esther, the story of Esther, the Purim story. And there's a lot of, it's a really interesting story. I learn something new almost every time I read it. And I'm going to look at it right now to just focus on what the story has to say about different strategies of being Jewish in the diaspora. So that's what I'm going to focus on. And if you think about it, there's lots of different strategies. By the way, I'm borrowing, if not stealing, all the ideas today from, there's two sources. One is Yoram Chazoni wrote a book called The Dawn, which is all about Esther, the story of Esther. And there's Graubart, who wrote an article about the what I'm talking about right now, this different strategies of being Jewish outside of the land of Israel in the diaspora. So if you think about it, right, there's lots of different strategies. One is you try to disappear. So you change your name from Galitsky. My mother's maiden name was Galitsky, but her family changed it to Gale so they could be more American, actually, so people maybe wouldn't know that they were Jewish. I mean, to kind of hide in suburban America. And, there's this myth that those guys at Ellis Island were changing all these names because they were too hard to pronounce. But, it didn't happen. In Ellis Island, they had lists, and they were bureaucrats, and they stuck to the lists that they were given in the manifests, which were made in Europe on the boats on the way over. So there wasn't some Ellis Island officer that was trying to rob everybody of their distinctive name and their Jewishness. In fact, my family would admit that they changed it themselves. They didn't like Galitsky, like the way it sounded. They wanted it to be. They didn't want to be as Jewish, quite that Jewish. Right. They wanted to be American. And there's all sorts of evidence about that, even in the Shalom Aleichem book, where they start changing their name from Mapel to Mike, and they just didn't like it, and they wanted to be American. So that's a strategy, right? So you fit in. It's a strategy maybe that's based on some fear or getting ahead. If sometimes you're not thinking about that clearly. I'm just more comfortable presenting myself as an American as opposed to being a Jew. Doesn't mean you're giving up on Judaism, but you're kind of hiding it a little bit. You move away from the Jewish neighborhoods, you move to the suburbs. So that's assimilation. Another strategy is you leave, right? You figure that this just isn't going to work, and they're just going to kill us anyway. So if you happen to have an Israel, you go to Israel and you take your stand there, or you separate yourself entirely. You say, well, it's too dangerous and spiritually dangerous, so you go into ghettos. And I'm not judging any of these. These are all strategies that we've tried over the years, or that have been forced on us. Or you integrate. So integrating is not quite the same thing as assimilating. Integrating is that I will be American because this is where I live, but I'll keep my name as Pinchas Galitsky, and I'm going to keep kosher, and I'm going to start kosher restaurants, but I'm also going to get jobs out there on Wall Street, and I'm going to run for office, and so that's integration. So you got all these different strategies that Jews have tried over the years, and the Megillah, to me, the Megillat Esther, there's a lot of Megillahs. Megillah just means scroll. There's a lot of scrolls in the Bible, but this story is, to me, about how you pick these different strategies, and actually you'll see, I believe, it privileges one particular strategy. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of verses to get across what I'm trying to get across. So first on page 10, verse 5, we meet this guy Mordechai. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the verses in English, but it's the last paragraph on the page. There was a certain Jew. So you go ahead and read you can follow in English or in Hebrew. I'm going to read it in Hebrew. Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushan. There was a Jew in Shushan Abira, the capital. Ushmo Mordechai. His name was Mordechai. Of course, it doesn't just stop with his name. It gives his lineage. Mordechai. Ben Yair. Okay, so his father is Yair. Ben Shimi. Ben Kish. Ish Yemini. So he's from the tribe of Benjamin. Okay? So he's Mordechai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimi, the son of Kish, from the tribe of Benjamin. This actually, it's very hard to recognize this today because of what we've done to the name Mordechai, but it's a very important verse. This is a very important verse. So I'll start with Kish, right? That's the last thing in the list, in the lineage. Anybody know who Kish was? Kish had a son named Saul. So Kish was King Saul's father. So Kish was a very important guy. So it tells us that this Mordechai, the lineage, is a royal lineage. He's actually from Saul. Okay, And he's a Benjaminite. Benjamin's a very important tribe because it's also the tribe of Saul. Okay, and then you've got some great Jewish names here: Yair, Shimi. Okay, even Mordechai. So this is where it's tricky here because anybody know any Jewish Mordechais? Yeah. Of course, it's a very common Jewish name. Well, nowadays it's not because it's just because it's a little old school and people are afraid of it. But the fact is, for a long time, this was a classic Jewish name. The thing is that in the book, from the context of the book itself, it's not a Jewish name at all, right? I mean, some of you know that too. It's based on the god Marduk. Marduk is a god, a pagan god, and it's Marduchai. It means person of Marduk. So somehow Mordechai, who's got this Jewish lineage, changes his name because I can tell you his mother did not name him. It'd be me like me naming my kid Christopher Christopherson, Christopher Christian, or Zeus. I mean, a Jewish parent doesn't name their kid that, but so Mordechai takes on this Persian name. Why does he do that?
Blended?
Yeah, because he's an ambitious guy. He figures that's his strategy. We find out later that why is he hanging out at the gate all the time? He's a courtier and he wants to succeed. I mean, I'll go further. I mean, there's a competition between him and Haman to become the important prime minister. We know that for sure, to become the important prime minister to the king, because when Haman, I'm giving away the end of the story, but you know it already, when Haman is deposed, Mordechai takes his place. But all along, there's this competition between Haman and Mordechai. Mordechai decides himself that he's not going to succeed with the name Moshe Pipik, or Pinchas, or he has to be Chris Christensen or Galitsky. He's got to be Gael to succeed. But it's not just Gael. It's a Persian name. All right. Let me just show you one other thing so we can be clear here. Look at verse 7. He was was brought up, king of Babylon, and carried away, and he brought up Hadassah. So we've got now Hadassah is an orphan, and Mordechai, stands it as the father. I'm just going to read in Hebrew again. Vayi omen et Hadassah he Esther. So she changed her name. Who decides to change her name? First of all, is Esther a nice Jewish name? Nowadays it is. I mean, it's a beautiful name right now. I mean, there was a baby Sonia Israel. Sonia's talking to you right now. Sonia Israel just had a grandchild. Yesterday, was born. Name is Maya Esther. And of course, Sonia's mother was named Esther. So it's a good Jewish name, except that in this book, it's not a good Jewish name at all. It's Ishtar. I mean, it's based on it's a Persian goddess. And so whose idea is, and Hadassah is a good Jewish name. We've got that in the Torah. So whose idea is to change Hadassah, this good Jewish girl, this good Jewish name, to Esther? It's probably Mordechai. Because Mordechai's got a strategy of living here in the diaspora. The strategy is we've got to change. Well, we know one element of the strategy is we have to change our name. Okay, and then I'll show you one other thing. Let's just take questions for a second. Okay, and then verse 10. So what is the one thing that so there's this beauty competition to pick Esther, Ishtar, and Hadassah. And she enters the competition. Actually, it doesn't actually say she entered the competition. It seems like she was just beautiful enough to be part of it. And Mordechai gives her one piece of advice. Lo egida Esther etama. She didn't say to those folks who are grabbing her, we act this out. I'm reading it now as an adult to a bunch of adults. We often act out this story as this lovely sort of beauty pageant. But in fact, Esther was kidnapped. And Mordechai, in some ways, probably had to go along with it. Right? I mean, he doesn't try to fight back because they're kidnapping his niece to take her to the palace so she can be a concubine.
She'd be on the inside, though.
Well, in some ways, I think it's part of his strategy of blending in. That's what they do here. Esther. So you go along, but he has one piece of advice for her. Lo egida Esther tamai. He doesn't say who she is, her nationhood. Et moladata, how she was born. Ki Mordechai tziva aleha asher lo taki, because Mordechai had commanded her, don't tell them you're Jewish. Your name is Esther. Remember that? Ishtar. Don't say that you're Jewish. I'm Mordechai. My name is from Marduk. Let's try to hide. Yeah.
I think Mordechai is more clever than that. I think if you listen to the word, and forget the person's spelling. Mordechai is Mered, which is rebellion, and Chai lives. Rebellion lives. I think that's buried in his name. He's telling us.
I mean, that's pretty badly. I mean, it's pretty bad. It's buried pretty deeply. I mean, it's misspelled. Yeah, they changed the Chai to the Chai. Yeah. Well, he does. So, I mean, giving it away a little bit. Of course, we know the story. He abandons that strategy. That's he goes into the story with that strategy. Okay, I want to look at a little bit more. All right, so look at verse 21. I mean, chapter 2 is a really important verse because it brings everything up. Okay, verse 21. That's on page 15, and it's the last paragraph of chapter 2. In those days, so he sits at the gate of the king. Again, you don't sit at the gate of the king unless you've got ambitions. He's a powerful person, but he's got ambitions to be even more powerful. He's a political player, wants to stay a political player. And big tan vatera shnei sarisei melech mishomrei asaf vayivakshul yishloch yad b'melech achashverosh, and he discovers this rebellion, Mered, against the king. There's always these plottings against the king. Haman is probably plotting to take over also, by the way. I mean, and maybe Mordechai would too. I mean, that's the kind of society they were in. But there was this one, and Mordechai, in order to ingratiate himself more into the king, gives up Bigtan and Sheresh, and it just goes to show that and his loyalty. So there's lots of things. First of all, that he's ambitious politically, and his loyalty is to the king. His loyalty to the king is probably because he's got ambitions of his own. And as a strategy to further his ambitions, he hides the fact that he's Jewish. Okay. So all of this changes.
Rabbi,
yeah.
In this instance, Esther went to the king, and there's no detail about the propriety of entering into the king's chamber.
Right.
Well, it's only later that we see that ceremony.
That's right, yeah. Doesn't really fit into. It's an interesting comment. I'm just not responding because it doesn't really fit into where I'm going. But hold it for now. Let's see if I come up with something. But let's go now to. So now we have the person Haman. So Haman sort of enters this picture of this. It's not just assimilating, but it's sort of radical. It's not assimilating like we think of with our parents or ourselves a little bit, where we're downplaying it. We're trying to fit in a little bit. This is a little more radical than that. It's like the changing of the name and the disappearing, and don't tell anybody that you're Jewish. It's almost like a disappearing kind of assimilating. Although they're not giving up. There's no sense that he's converting. I'm not sure it's possible to convert. And here it's more like an ethnic identity. But so the wild card in this, of course, is Haman, who that's always the wild card for the strategy of assimilating. The anti-Semite who doesn't want you to assimilate, doesn't think it's possible because looks at Jews as this eternal malignant force and just figures that it's not possible. And you had them all through history. I mean, Spain is actually the biggest example of it, where there were people that felt like you couldn't convert out because Judaism was sort of this racial entity, and so there can't be a Marrano, there can't be a Converso, because you've got this racial ethnic identity. So that's the character Haman, and that's what Haman conveys to the king in the verses we're going to read now. Just a second. Yeah.
What does Haman mean in Persian?
What?
What does Haman mean?
Yeah, I don't know. Remember, the book is actually written in Hebrew. So if I was looking for a play on words for Haman, in Hebrew it's pretty clear. Man means what, but it also means sort of non-entity. It's not. It can also mean nothing or nobody. So it could be just the nobody, and that could be their play on words, the Hebrew play on words. I don't know if it has a Persian derivation anyway. But this is what Haman says. So Vayomer Haman lemelech Achashverosh. So Haman says to the king, Yeshno echad mefuzar farad. They're scattered, Ben Hamin and all the other people, mikol medidot machotecha, v'datehem shonot mikol am. And their belief system, what they do, their ideology is different from everybody. V'datei hamelech ein amasim, but they will never do your will. What they have as a nationality, as an ideology, is utterly and totally incompatible with you and your aims. So here he's actually claiming the opposite of what Mordechai is intending to do. So Mordechai is intending to disappear, to assimilate, and Haman is telling the king it's not possible. They can't do it. Maybe even they think they can try, but really it's most likely part of a nefarious plot to insinuate themselves. This is what anti-Semites say, and ultimately they're like a virus. and they're going to take over. I mean, that's his argument. And Achashverosh says, okay. I mean, he's very passive. He's very passive in the story. And but very important too later is that Haman gives him lots of money. That you start to learn about Achashverosh is that he's vulnerable to being bribed. It doesn't matter what he says. The whole speech doesn't matter. I think what we're hearing from Haman is kind of what he believes, and also sort of the attitude of anti-Semites in general, who really interfere and sometimes make it impossible for us Jews to follow this strategy of assimilate. You can't assimilate because there's going to be a Haman. And the Haman is going to be the one. It's not so much Jews. It's not even an ethical issue too. The anti-Semite himself, herself, as an entity, doesn't allow the strategy of assimilating, of disappearing. Okay, let me keep going. So now Mordechai has to decide what to do, and we find out. So this is chapter 4. We're going to go to chapter 4, page 16. Because keep in mind, I mean, one way or another. So what happens? Ahasuerus, actually Haman issues this decree, and Ahasuerus goes along with it, kill all the Jews. Mordechai is Marduk. Now, Haman obviously knows that he's Jewish. It's not a total secret, right? Because that's Haman has this temper tantrum. I want to say one other thing too, which I forgot to say. So the whole idea that Mordechai doesn't bow down to Haman because it's against his religion, that you may have learned in Sunday school, is clearly not true. There's nothing wrong in Judaism with bowing down to another human being. There's something definitely wrong with bowing down because you think that human being is a god. But in the ancient Near East, I mean, bowing down was a way of just showing to.
Bowing down.
Sorry?
What is bowing down?
I don't know. I don't know. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Any kind of bowing down to another human being is allowed in Judaism. Let me just say that the Talmud clearly is puzzled by this, and there's even this midrash that says that Haman must have worn an idol, around his neck, because that justifies why Mordechai wouldn't bow down. Because of course you could bow down. And for sure he would have bowed down to Achashverosh, to Ahasuerus. Right. So why? The question is, why doesn't he bow down? And the answer is pretty simple. It's because he's got a political rivalry with Haman, and he doesn't want to show that he accepts the authority of this guy who's basically his political rival. I'm not bowing down to this guy, not because it's against my religion. It's a political statement. It's not a religious statement. So that, of course, infuriates Haman, and you understand a bit of the personality of the kind of bullying narcissist that Haman is. So Haman can't be happy in power if there's one guy. And he's going to start this race war, this violent race war, because the Jew doesn't bow down to him. But the Jew bowing down is not a religious statement. It's a political statement. Okay. So Haman knows that he's Jewish, so he wants to kill all the Jews. So here's what Mordechai could do. He could save himself. This is my theory. He could save himself because he's Marduk. He could just say, it's not me, I'm not Jewish. He could play on his relationship with Esther. He could play on his relationship with the king, and he could survive, which is basically taking his strategy to its length, right? Which in the end, just to deny that I'm Jewish. I'm not Jewish. I'm not Marduk. And this crazy Haman, I don't know what it's about, but I'm here, Marduk. I've got my niece Ishtar. We're close to the king. And I'll show you my birth certificate. I'll lie. I'm not Jewish. It seems to me he could do it. Now, you could argue back that Haman identifies him as Jewish. Right. Maybe Haman's not that powerful right now. If Haman was really that powerful, then he would have just arrested Mordechai. But Mordechai is free. The fact that Mordechai is free shows that at this point in the story, Haman is not all that powerful. He's gathering power. He's trying to become powerful. He's bribing the king, but he's not fully powerful yet. Now, so I have a sense that Mordechai could survive. However, for sure, Esther could survive. For sure. I mean, nobody knows that she's Jewish. She's Ishtar. She's married to the king. Obviously, the king likes her. Okay, so they have to make a decision. Are they going to go all the way with this assimilation and save themselves? Or there's something else. So here's Mordechai decides right away. This is chapter 1. And Mordechai yada et kol asher nasa vayikra Mordechai et begadav. So Mordechai learns everything that he did, and he tears his clothes. Vayobash sak, and he wears a sack. It really means sack, right? Vayefer and dust. And then he goes to into the city, walks along the streets of the city, and he's screaming and crying. Vayavo ad lifnei sha'ar melech, and he comes to where he hangs out with all the courtiers. He comes to the gates of the king. Okay, so at this point, Mordechai is identifying himself. Why is he screaming and crying? Because of this enactment against the Jews. So Mordechai decides the opposite of hiding. He now identifies himself fully and completely. I'm in mourning because I am Mordechai the Jew. I'm a Jew, and he goes to the king's gate. Okay, so we're going to run out of time, so I'm not going to read it. You can read it yourself. So Esther sees this. Remember, Esther's kind of literally cloistered, right? And you don't have the internet in those days, and there's not like a newspaper that she can read. She doesn't know exactly what's going on, but she does hear that Mordechai is dressed in sackcloth, right, and dust, and really seems to be proudly proclaiming that he's Jewish. And she thinks, what is going on here? We had an agreement. We're going to hide, and now my uncle is. What are you doing? Because normally, how do you dress when you're at the gate of the king?
Legally.
Yeah, one thing none things that you're not wearing is you're not wearing a beard and a shtreimel to show that you're Jewish. You're not wearing a yarmulke, even like a yarmulke like me. You're not, because that's not Persian. But now he's doing the opposite. He's not even dressed like with a yarmulke. He's really calling attention to himself. And Esther's surprised because we don't do that in our family. We don't call attention to ourselves as Jewish. So Mordechai. So let me go on here and read a little bit. So Mordechai now has to talk her into his strategy, the strategy that he's now developing. So this is verse 13 on page 18. And I'll just say as a side point, this is one of the sad points of the story, is they can't even talk to each other directly. This is how much of a slave you become when you embrace that strategy of assimilation. Whenever you try to hide anything in your life, right, you become a kind of slave because they can't even talk to each other. Because she's a slave now to her new identity as queen. So they can only talk by sending messages back and forth to each other. And in the Haggadah part here, it's actually very awkwardly written. Because Mordechai has to tell a messenger, the messenger has to tell Esther, they're writing notes back and forth. So they can't communicate to each other because they're both sort of slaves. Esther certainly now is a slave. Even as a queen, it's kind of these golden handcuffs she's got. All right, so verse 12, 13... I'll just read it. So let's see. I'm trying to find out where it is in the. Then Esther. All right. Yeah, it's the last paragraph. You can look at the last paragraph. I'm reading in Hebrew. Last paragraph in English, page 19. Esther hears what Esther said. Vayomer Mordechai lashiv et Esther. Esther said, Mordechai says back to Esther, Al tidami benafshech lehimalet bet hamelach mikol hayudim. Don't think that you can escape. So he's saying this strategy that we decided on assimilating, it's not going to work. They're going to find out that we're Jewish. Because if you're quiet now, so he says, first of all, we'll get salvation from some other place. The only allusion, I think, to God in the whole story. So somehow God will save us. Ve'at uveit avich tovedu. Okay, but you, now here's a key point here. Uveit avich, in your whole family. Maybe you'll be able to save yourself, but ultimately your family is going to be destroyed. And ultimately, what's going to happen is if you and I go into hiding and decide we're Persians, we're not Jewish, Beit avich, our families will be destroyed. And by saying our families will be destroyed, he's saying there's more at stake here. Do we really want to be a party to the genocide of our people? This is our choice right now. Our choice is, yes, we can survive. But if we survive, it's possible our entire lineage will be destroyed. In fact, it's likely that our entire lineage will be destroyed. So we have to change strategies right now. And all we can really do, so the only way we can, what it ends up saying is that we have to say that we're Jewish, loud and clear. So now it's very clear what he's instructing here. I know I told you before, don't tell anybody that you're Jewish. Now you have to do exactly the opposite, what I'm doing right now. Tell everybody that you're Jewish. Go in and tell the king that you're Jewish, because that's the only thing that's going to save us. Okay, that's essentially the shift. Okay, I'm going to say something very quickly because we're going to be out of time, and then I'll show you something very clever that Esther does, and we'll see if there's a few moments for questions. So first of all, I'll bring it back because this is an important issue for us too. What do we do in a diaspora? Basically, what Mordechai teaches, and I think what the book is saying, is that the strategy of assimilation is not going to work. I mean, they say because of anti-Semitism.
Right.
We could also add because we just disappear that way. And if Judaism means anything to you, then assimilation just means a slow disappearance. Okay. So for them, going back to Israel wasn't a possibility either. Ghettoization wasn't a possibility either because they had that anti-Semite Haman. So what do they pick? What's left is integration. So the integration is that say you're Jewish, say it loud and clear, but don't give up it. Don't give it up and just integrate into the culture. Because what happens at the end of the story, of course, Mordechai becomes the prime minister. But he's the Jewish prime minister, right? I mean, it's very clear. He's told everybody that he's Jewish. And Esther tells everybody she's the Jewish queen. So the strategy that we have at the end, and then the Jews pick up arms and they fight on their own behalf as Jews. So the whole strategy of disappearing is put by the wayside by the end. Okay, and I think this is a powerful lesson for Jews in the diaspora, which is that you don't have to assimilate. In fact, assimilating might end up being a really counterproductive strategy. But what is possible, if you push it enough, if you have enough bravery, I mean, in the end, it's a story about bravery, Mordechai, Esther, and the people that fight in the end, then this other strategy is possible, which is to integrate, to be fully Jewish, sort of the Dershowitz strategy, chutzpah, and keep your names, keep your customs, but have jobs in America, and integrate into the culture, into the society. Be proudly Jewish, be proudly Persian, be proudly American. Okay. Let me see if there's any questions or comments.
Esther's actually his cousin.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, I always learned it was a niece, but she's his ward anyway. I mean, she's
I think they were
wardess. I don't know. Yeah.
You started this today by saying Mordechai was Ish, a man who lived in Persia. And can you tell us when they used Ish versus Adam? We talked about it yesterday. What's the significance of that Ish?
I don't know. I don't think there's a difference. I think they're just synonyms. Ish, Adam.
In this era of Xerxes, because Xerxes is said to be Ahasuerus, right, according to the scholars.
Yeah.
The Persians were liberal compared to the predecessor of Babylonians.
Yeah, yeah.
And they actually permitted captive people to return to their own homes. And Jews to go back to
Right, yeah.
So you would think that there would have been an environment of acceptance of the Jews in a very positive way. Yeah, but I guess the story though throws in this wild card. The wild card is Haman, because yes, clearly there was this attitude. Mordechai, a Jew, could see himself as being prime minister. So obviously there was. And I mean, he was hiding that he was Jewish. There's a subtle difference between hiding and outright denial. That's the choice he's got in the middle of the story when he says we're going to kill all the Jews. He hasn't gone that far. He's changed his name to Marduk and he dresses like a Persian, but he doesn't totally. And obviously the word is out that he's Jewish. So it is a relatively accepting culture and society. There's a wild card. So is Germany. The wild card is Haman. Is that? And I'm not saying not every relatively accepting society is going to have a Haman that turns everything on its head. But this one did. And Germany did too, and and it could happen again. Let's not fool ourselves. So that's what I think the author is saying. That's the problem with assimilation. There's going to be Hamans out there, and you're not going to be able to do it. So you might as well stand up for yourself. Now, I thought what you were going to say, which I think is interesting, is possibly they did have the option of just leaving and going back to Israel. The thing is that a lot of wealthy Jewish communities have that option right now, and don't do it. So it's just another strategy. We'll take our stand here. We'll be here. We'll be good Americans. We won't go to Israel, but we won't give up at all on being Jewish. First of all, because we don't want to, but also because it's ineffective anyway. They're gonna persecute us anyway. So let's be proudly Jewish and work within the system to build a good life for ourselves here.
There you go. That makes the sense.
Yeah.
One of the explain on the names. I'm sure this wasn't intended, but looking at Esther, what that could mean. It has a samach tav resh, which is hidden.
Yeah.
Aleph,
I think that for sure.
The leader is hidden.
Esther
is her name. The leader is hidden, and Mordechai is a rebellion lives. I think there's a story behind it.
I do think the name Esther meaning hidden may be a pun there also. Ishtar, but it's also the person who's trying to hide themselves. Okay, maybe hang in there one more minute. I'll tell you I just think this is a neat part of the story. So I never read through that carefully. The whole so Esther goes to the king and says, I want to have a party. And then there's a party, and then she says, I want to have another party. And why doesn't she just go and tell him, Haman's trying to kill us. One party, then another party. And I understand that she's trying to be careful and all that. But so what I finally learned from these two writers, it's not these aren't my ideas, is Esther has actually a brilliant strategy. You got to read the story carefully. So first she goes to the king and says, I want to have a party, and here's the guest list: you, me, and Haman. So now the king's thinking, okay, you and me, but Haman? Like, why Haman? Okay, yeah, right. So right away, so she's planting the suspicion that why does Esther want Haman? Now so then they have the party, and there's another party, and he says, well, what did you want? Why the party? And Esther says, here's what I want: another party. Here's the guest list: you, me, and Haman. So now you think the king is thinking, Haman, like what? Yeah, like isn't 3 a crowd? Like, hey, Haman. So then, of course, now Achashverosh, the king, can't sleep that night. That's the next story.
That's right.
Why can't he sleep? Because he's concerned about Haman. Is Esther having an affair with Haman? Is that what's happening? I mean, why does she keep inviting him? Okay, so he can't sleep that night. So then what happens? He can't sleep that night. So what do you do when you can't sleep? So he starts reading the old, records.
Yeah.
And then he says, so the guys read the records. And then he says, who's in the court? It's the middle of the night. Who's in the court? And somebody says, oh, Haman's here. Now, Haman's there because, remember, he wants to kind of build the gallows but so we know that, the reader, but all Achashverosh knows is that Haman's in the court in the middle of the night. Why is Haman in the court in the middle of the night? Well, he's got his suspicions.
Yeah.
So then it's all set up. So at the party, the final party with the 3 of them. So now Esther's set up this suspicion. The king has the suspicion that Haman is trying to make a move on the queen. So as soon as Esther says, this wicked Haman, he's already prone to hate Haman. And therefore, she very cleverly, uses her, and then of course, they're together on the couch. And so she very cleverly uses her body to provoke suspicion from Achashverosh, the parties. And that's why it works. So I think that's and it doesn't fit into the whole story I was telling you right now. It just shows you how clever she is. She's using everything she's got. All right, thank you.